It's time to be woke. Take off your shades, it helps see through the smoke. Cause the wicked hide behind the cloak. And if you stay in the mist, you gon' be soaked. So listen up, cause this hair of the dog. What's real, what ain't? Is this the fog or smog? Cause there's a difference when you breathe it in. So don't let the corporate media take you for a spin. This that morning show, they put you in the know. So I hope that you ready, cause all we do is go, go, go. Yeah, come get your info, you gon' be like, whoa. Hair of the dog, we bout that, ayy. We in the zone, we out here, yeah. Speeding the
Hey, everybody. Good morning. I'm Andy Kennedy. Welcome to Hair of the Dog. It is Wednesday, I think. It's Wednesday all day. And thank you very much for joining us. Carrie and I have a lot to talk about because we've been subject to the interweave gods and them somehow getting behind the algorithms and not wanting us to stream. But hopefully we've at least got a entertaining show for you. Carrie is still having a few glitches here and there with her internet, but we're going to muddle through it until, you know, we can afford to get a TV broadcast van put in her driveway. But we have to wait for her to get a driveway. So I just wanted to relate a few things to you on a personal level. It's been kind of a sad week for us here at the house. Older dog, we had to put down because she was in congestive heart failure, and she had a nice long life, and she's a great dog. And of course, we're very, very sad, but we're grateful that she's not suffering anymore. So it's been a bit of a surreal week for me and my family here at the house. But when I look at all of the things that are happening around and what's transpired, and I will admit that I own a pickup truck. Now it's still running. It hasn't broke down, but if it did, there's a argument being made that my life is currently a country music song. And so it's like I said, it's a little surreal right now with everything that's going on that we see in the news and locally. And myself, where I am in Ontario, I'm Canadian, and we've just basically come out of lockdown. So, there's a lot of opening up of the economy and society here. And with that also comes the trepidation of, what's it going to look like this time, right? Did we stay in lockdown long enough and do we have enough people vaccinated that we're not going to see the numbers spike again, either this summer or in the fall? So, there's a lot of things weighing on people's minds right now. And I won't say that my situation is at least as bad or worse than anybody else that's listening to this broadcast, because I know Americans are dealing with a hell of a lot more in terms of, just having the ability to stay in their homes or feed their families or what have you. So it's all relative, but clearly it's still, a very tough time to try to be surviving. And kudos to you if you're doing it, if you're making it, right? And we don't hear that enough. People don't say that enough, right? If you're keeping it together, right? If you're making it through either yourself or your family or your neighbors or your community, then kudos to you, because it's not an easy thing right now, right? And so we need to tell each other this more, because there's strength in numbers, and we only survive when we work together towards something. And so that's my little rant at the beginning of the show. So we've got a lot to talk about, so I'm going to stop. But first, my next part of this is introducing my lovely and talented co-host, Ms. Carrie Barber. Good morning, Carrie.
Good morning, Andy, and I am very sorry about your baby. Yeah, we all go through it, and one of the things that I like to remind myself is that having pets, which for most of us become kind of our children, when you become the caretaker of a creature, they teach you all sorts of lessons, and one of the greatest, hardest lessons that they always teach us is how to let go, and it's tough. Um, so I feel for you and your family, and dread the day that we have to go through it again too. So
Oh, sure. And it's tough because it's a very interesting dynamic being a pet owner because for all intents and purposes, you're completely responsible for everything that happens to that pet, right? You are completely the overseer of all of the things that happen, uh, feeding, shelter, uh, everything. And so when it comes to the end, if your pet doesn't pass away naturally on its own, you have to weigh, um, do I feel that my pet is suffering? And if I am choosing to have my pet to continuing to live, is that because of me and not considering my pet, right? And if you can come to an understanding that indeed you believe your pet is suffering and you want to end their suffering, that's a hard thing to do. But because you're responsible for everything that happens to that pet, you can't help but feel a little bit of guilt afterwards with, did I act too soon? Did I allow this pet to live as long a full life as they could, while I assumed that maybe that should end because of suffrage that they can't really tell you, right? And so that's always something that I feel when it afterwards, and my wife has really fought with that over the last couple of days. And so yeah, it's what every pet owner goes through, right? The unconditional love that we get from our pets that gets us through the day, right? That helps us through life. This is the price that you pay at the end, is that you have to say goodbye. And it's really tough, but it's just a part of it all.
yeah, and I think that touches on a subject that kind of propels us into what we're going to talk about today, and that's that developing empathy, which here's where I start my rant, and I want to address those people who have no empathy or have cultivated within themselves excuses to do away with empathy, and put it in context of, I am willing to sacrifice your family for the belief that mine will be okay. And that's bullshit. So I want to dedicate this segment to Chris. She's one of our patron supporters who has often said, she knows that I'm a little bit of a firebrand, and I very rarely bring it onto the screen. So Chris, this one's for you. So here's what's going on in the national context. And Andy mentioned this before very nicely. I'm not going to be so nice. We have a number of DNC operatives who are themselves, without this level of empathy or cognitive ability, trying to shut down the March for Medicare under the pretext that they know best. And I'm going to go through some of their talking points and why they're complete and utter bullshit in the context of where we are right now and during the global pandemic, which, by the way, wave 2 is coming to the United States as we speak, and climate change. Why all of their arguments right now are complete and utter bullshit, and not only that, but will lead to more death and misery in the short term and the long term based on what they are trying to do. So let me back up a little bit for some of you who are not aware. I posted a link in the chat, so go ahead and click on that. But these are activists, regular folks, regular people who said enough is enough. I'm going to get my ass off the couch, and I want to go do something to stop the chaos and misery that is happening right now. These are regular people who took their private time to organize these marches. And this is to advance Medicare for all. So we're going to do a whole segment on what Medicare for all is. It is not a government takeover. It is purely regulation of costs at the service, the point of service. That is all it is. But what has happened is we got a performative bill that was reintroduced. This is HR 1976, and you can go look it up on congress.gov. It was introduced again by Representative Jayapal, and she herself has come out and said, I don't want to vote on it. This thing is sitting there 120 days collecting dust. It takes 3 minutes to schedule a hearing for this. And this particular bill, last time it had to go through 4 committees, didn't go anywhere. This time it has been assigned 7 committees, 7 committees. That takes a long time to do the hearings and everything else. So you can see right there that they are going to kill this bill with the calendar, and they have yet to even start one date, one hearing on this bill. Okay, so that's the first one. The second one, go to congress.gov and look up this bill. This is the first time in the history of introduction of bills that any bill has been saddled with a single clause. At the bottom, it says that the Speaker of the House, which right now is Nancy Pelosi, can stall this bill,
Nancy.
Yeah. So it is the first time ever a bill has had this on it where it says the Speaker of the House, no matter what happens in committee, no matter what your representative says in committee, she can kill it. And that is not democratic. But here's what's happening. You have a bunch of these DNC operatives who are themselves, for whatever reason, and I'm going to speculate, and this is purely my speculation. I know one of them is, well, until recently was a destitute alcoholic narcissist, evicted multiple times from his apartment, who is now out here as a champion trying to destroy these marches and trying to defame anybody who's on it. And he has sent many of these people to other organizers to defame them. One organizer he has alleged is beating his kids with zero evidence. And I was actually at the event that he alleged this happened, and I didn't see any of it. So this man is lying. He's lying through his teeth. But why? Why? When he himself was so destitute just a short time ago, didn't have insurance, why are they out there trying to rally all of these bad actors to harass people, to defame things, and actually influencing people? Chicago, I'm looking at you. All of the Bernie organizers, all the Our Revolution people, I'm looking at you. They are influencing you to sit down. And you cannot do that right now. And let me tell you why a march, for those of you who have missed all of U.S. history, why a march is important. Yes, we have this bill sitting in Congress doing not a damn thing. No change has ever happened in this country, ever, from Congress first. It always happens with the people. It always happens with us applying pressure. And oh, by the way, this is part of our constitutionally protected rights. This is what we were supposed to do. We are supposed to get out there and let them know what we want. And when you have a bill like Medicare for All that will help the entire country during a global pandemic where we are facing extinction in climate change, why the hell would you sit on this unless you're trying to do the exact same thing you do every time midterms come up and you want to lose because you do not want to have to act at all. And then you can sit back and say, oh, we lost the midterms, we no longer have a majority, and oh, by the way, it was all these damn progressives trying to get health care so their families don't die. Well, here's a clue for you. If you are one of these people who is out there trying to advocate for everyone to sit down and shut up, 600,000 families today have to pay funeral expenses for their loved ones who have died during this pandemic. And oh, by the way, for the next year, multiple years, they will be paying medical bills for the treatment at the end of life for their family members. If you think that's okay, If you think it's okay that 45,000 people die every year for lack of access to healthcare in the richest nation on the face of the planet, then there's something wrong with you. There's absolutely something wrong with you. And if you want to challenge me at all about expansion of the ACA, bring it, because I guarantee you, I know that bill, I know the flaws of it, I know where all the cost is going, and I know that the savings from ACA, every quarter, it is reported by CMS, every quarter, that the savings come from shifting our doctors, from making sure our doctors and hospitals are not getting paid. So therefore, they will not take more Medicaid or Medicare patients. You are killing us, and I'm tired of it. So if you are one of these people that is out there harassing regular people who just want a chance at life, who just want a chance at the American dream, then damn you. Damn you. If you can't do it yourself, get the fuck out of the way. I'm so tired of this shit. I have health insurance. I have 2 forms of health insurance. Being disabled, I had to wait 2 years to get Medicare. 2 years. Do you even understand why they put a 2-year wait on that? They are hoping that the disabled person dies. They are hoping that you have the cost savings through that collateral damage. I haven't. The day I got my card, I cried because everybody deserves this. Everybody deserves the same level of care that every member of Congress is getting right now that we pay for. The problem with you is you don't understand that with Medicare for All, we have already been paying that bill. We have already been paying that bill and not getting the coverage. That is exactly like buying a house and not being able to live in it, but you are paying the bill and having some stranger off the street tell you that's okay. It's not. So if you are one of these people following this narcissist and harassing people on social media, harassing people in real life, trying to tell them to sit down and shut up, shame on you. Get a conscience. And that is what I'm going to say about Medicare for All. If you haven't already signed up for a march, if you haven't already started pushing the narrative and helping people get familiar with all of this, you need to do it. And I will show you exactly what Medicare for All is. I even have a full 1-hour explainer on what insurance actually is. Insurance has nothing to do with healthcare. It is all about finances. The two are not the same. And anybody who wants an explainer, all of this, in fact, I posted a link to slides. If you go out to this site, this is a wonderful graphic designer who got it right, makes it very simple. This is Connect the Dots USA. Connect the Dots USA. This graphic designer put together all of these slides and charts to help you explain it to your neighbors. And I want to make this clear. I've already said it on Twitter. I don't give a shit if somebody is a xenophobe, if they are a Nazi, if they're a white supremacist, all of this. I will march with them for Medicare for All, and I'll tell you why. It's very simple. This is human nature. The minute I reach out and let one of these people who is so hurt that they have turned toward a vile position, the minute I reach out and let them know that I care, that they matter, that begins the healing process for them too. If you want to end racism, if you want to end xenophobia at an individual level, Daryl Davis did this. He reached out to white supremacists as a Black man and let them know, I care about you, and I'm a regular person, and we have more in common with each other than we have separating us. That's how you heal it. So for those people who make up some arbitrary bullshit excuse about, I'm not going to support Medicare for All for a xenophobe or a bigot or whatever, shame on you. You take the first step. You be the bigger person and you reach out. And Medicare for All is for everybody because we are all suffering.
Absolutely. That's very well said, Gary. It's beautiful. And I'm going to say something now so that you can have a breath. It's absolutely abhorrent to me, the American system of of healthcare. And, you know, as most of you know, or if you don't know, I'm Canadian. I live in a country that has healthcare paid for. It doesn't cost me a thing to get, you know, basic and emergency healthcare in my country. I do not ever have to worry about going into debt, right? This is a no-brainer for me and for people that live in pretty much any other country in the world that has free healthcare like I do, every single one. And so it's absolutely abhorrent that Americans can go bankrupt because they got sick or they got hurt, right? This is such an important thing. It is Americans' right to free speech and free assembly to march wherever the fuck they want, right? It doesn't hurt any movement for Americans to get together and march. Did Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement stop crossing the bridge at Selma because they were afraid they were going to hurt the movement? Of course not. That's total horseshit, right? It's complete bull. You have the right to do this. And especially in the United States, where the mainstream media is not going to report on any of these things, right? Because they're bought and paid for by the oligarch class.
Right. So here's a fun fact, and this is an established fact. The Journal of American Medicine in 2016, the data hasn't come out since then, so I wish I had updated numbers, but Journal of American Medicine, this is the Union of Doctors, Hospital Scientists, did a study on the amount of ad dollars that was spent by big pharma and insurance companies on the major networks. And they came up with a number of 276 billion with a B. And the Journal of American Medicine concluded that that was enough of an influence to make sure that all of the coverage on universal health care was negative. It is all monetary driven. And I do want to get to some of these comments because, oh boy, the chat is off and running this morning. So Nadia says, I came in late. What did I miss? Better catch up.
So we're half an hour in. We only have half an hour left, so we can't redo the first half an hour. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So Nadia says, if it's not a government takeover, is it enough? And here's the thing, and this is why American consumers are very confused. I'm going to use the word confused about how our insurance works. So today, there is one private company that handles all Medicare claims for the entire nation. That company is called Leidos, and they're out of Virginia. In 2015, the CEO on their SEC reports and standing in front of all of their investors in a live webinar, he actually said, we know that universal health care is coming, so we are going to make some strategic advancements in our own data and security to prepare for that. So we already have the infrastructure in place. HMS at the government level and CMS do nothing when it comes to managing our healthcare system. All they are doing is reporting. They're a regulatory agency and they collect information. So what Medicare for All does is removes the insurance company as a source of drain on the economy. And it regulates, Medicare for All regulates the prices that can be charged at a geographic level. So this means in New York, if you go for an MRI, the price is set by kind of the prevailing price point for that area. The price of an MRI in New York is not going to be the same in Iowa because obviously incomes and everything else is different. Cost of living is different. What Medicare for All does is under the same model that we have with Medicare, it establishes price points. And so a doctor will know, okay, I need to send this patient in for an MRI. Here's what it's going to cost. And They put in the bill, and the bill goes through the company of Leidos. Leidos processes that, and then the government sends that check through Leidos. Leidos sends it right back. That's all that this is. This is not a government takeover. Hospitals are private, doctors are private. You as a private citizen, you get to decide who you get to go see, not your insurance company. And you get to have that relationship with your doctor. They're not spending all their time filling out paperwork. Has anybody noticed why we have had such a consolidation of private practices? This is why, because they have to spend so much time working through the paperwork and costs and fighting with the insurance companies. They just can't do it. So they went to a hospital group. That's why. We can reverse all of that so our doctors and nurses and practitioners can get back to doing what they were trained to do. So I just want to make that real quick explainer on this is why it's not government takeover. It is just regulation, simple regulation. And oh, by the way, another fun fact, when Medicare was rolled out almost a century ago now, the promise was it was going to be for everybody. We were going to do those graduated age levels to roll people in. That was when it was going to be that incremental increase. We're still waiting for that. We're still waiting for that. So what we're doing now is pushing for it. We are demanding it. Change doesn't happen without a demand, and that is why we march. So
Absolutely.
So all of
Absolutely.
this is in context.
That's and that's a
So
very important point, Carrie, because as I was saying, the mainstream media is not going to cover this. The only way they'll cover this is if they could figure out a way to spin it in a bad light, right? Which is why this is so important to get people to participate, because there are too many people in the United States that still get their news from mainstream media. They aren't connected to the truth. They aren't connected to social media. They aren't connected to independent journalism. They don't know. They only have information that they can process, which is from the likes of CNN and MSNBC and Fox News, and they're not telling the truth, right? So how do you get the information to people that don't know that would benefit from a Medicare for all policy? You march, you get large number of people in the streets shouting and screaming and demanding Medicare for all. And then your neighbors find out, because this huge entity coming down the road is very hard to miss. And it doesn't matter what the mainstream media puts on their 6 o'clock news headlines. It's very hard to hide thousands and thousands of people coming down your street demanding Medicare for all. That's why this is so important. There's always been a critique of the left that we don't know how to organize. We don't have the funds, the time, what have you. We don't have the leadership. Well, we're doing it. And what are we seeing? We're seeing operatives that are apologists for the centrists, for the DNC, that are trying to co-opt this because they don't want it to happen. And it's getting to the point now on places like Twitter and Facebook and Instagram that these bad actors are getting cringy because they're so apparent, because they're so we see them for who they are, and they need to stop, because this is us organizing on a large scale. This is going to make a difference, and they're afraid to death of that. And that's why this is so important for you as an advocate for the left, for progressives and progressive policies and Medicare for all, to ignore them and support this march. It is that important.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. And I'm thrilled that we got to fire up on Andy today, too, because here's the thing. If it's just you marching, if you have to march by yourself, maybe you, one or two people, because other people are now terrified to get in the street. That's okay. That's okay. Be the first one on the dance floor. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And arm yourself with information. So, but let's get into our topic, because under the backdrop of Medicare for all, we have these big issues happening, right? Big issues. So, Andy, this would be the first graphic. Let's put this one up here, and that is the Delta variant. So, CJ, I saw your comment in the chat, and no, that is not a fact. COVID was not created to reduce the population. If you take a look at why we do research, particularly in Bethesda, Maryland, and in, I want to say it's Fairfax, Virginia, where we have another lab, like the Wuhan lab, why they do it. It's the premise, and Fauci kind of hinted at that, because we're not really supposed to be developing chemical warfare. It violates all treaties. What he said, and this is actually the mission, is we study things like anthrax because we want to have a solution should we face a biological warfare attack. So that's why they say they do it. So I appreciate you posting and sharing your thoughts, but no, that is not a fact. So let's keep it all factual as best we can. So here we go with the Delta, right? So when COVID was we first started to take it seriously in this country wasn't until March. We had already heard that, okay, well, when winter comes around, it'll slow down a little bit, but this virus seems to perform a little bit better in warmer weather. So we knew we were going to get a wave 2. We knew we were going to get it. And this virus also mutates as most biological entities do, some of us slower than others, but a virus is going to mutate quite faster. And we're trying to get Dr. Dillon, our friend of the show, he's a virologist who was working on all of this, back, so that we can talk through this with more credibility. But this particular Delta strain, we saw this perfecting itself in the global scale, and it hit India extraordinarily hard. And by the way, if you are not familiar with what's going on in Tunisia right now, Tunisia is at the northern part. This is for all my American friends who have no sense of geography. At the top of Africa, right at the top, it's a very, very small country in northern Africa. Their entire healthcare system is collapsed almost completely because they got hit so hard with it and they don't have enough vaccines. So the US, as of last week, pledged to give them like 500,000 vaccines, but other countries, particularly their neighboring countries, have brought in doctors and hospitals and created triage areas because Tunisia has been hit so hard. So Tunisia is a really nice example for what's going to happen in the US in some of our poorer rural areas. We already saw this in the first wave of COVID. And now, even in this country, the best highest performing state, of which mine is one, we're barely at 60% of vaccinations. So right now, we are almost completely wide open. We've got kids back in school. If you're vaccinated, you don't need a mask, all of these things. But that doesn't mean that you are not at risk for this Delta variant. And for those of you who are familiar with the flu and do get a flu shot, you know that even if you got a flu shot, you can still get the flu. The difference is probably not going to be as bad. You won't have as many dire symptoms as you would if you didn't have the vaccine. So what they're seeing now from the WHO, and I want to be honest and very clear about this, I lean into the WHO data, not necessarily the US CDC. And the reason for that, and I think that most people have seen this, is we're getting conflicting information from the US CDC. So I lean into the WHO because I'm looking at same thing that other doctors and hospitals are looking at. How is this affecting other countries? And just real quick, with Tunisia, the other population that we really need to take a hard look at is all of the study data is looking at Israel. Israel, who has vaccines, who has medical care, who has all of these things, who is also preventing vaccines from going to the Palestinians. The best that they have offered is vaccines that are expired, if anything at all. So shout out to the Palestinian people, and I hope that all of you who are watching today will help support the needs of the Palestinian people against what is quite literally genocide and going on in that country. So particularly in the wake of a pandemic and everything else that they are, we've already done a couple shows on it, but I am preparing yet another one on that situation, on that.
Yes.
So this is Delta. Delta is already in the US. And what I noticed, if you're a statistician and you're looking at the rate of increase, it's a magnitude of 10 for Delta and the increase. So if you look at the dates, like take an arbitrary date, June 11th, and then you look at June 14th, it's grown by a magnitude of 10. That's how virulent this particular strain is. So Andy, I predict that you're going to be on lockdown yet again in Canada, because Canada's actually trying to do some shit.
Well, and that's the thing. And there's some very scary statistics that have come out that don't take a huge leap of critical thinking to understand what's happening, right? We were singing the praises of places like New Zealand and Australia and Eastern Asian countries along the Pacific, like Japan and Taiwan and Thailand and Korea, and all these places that did a much better job than North American countries did in controlling this right off the bat. In fact, Australia was so good at it that they stayed in lockdown for long enough to completely get rid of the virus and open up properly and allow everybody to get together. But now we're with this Delta variant, it's making a comeback. There are now places back in lockdown in Australia where there's outbreaks. We're seeing this in Japan, where in a week and a half, the Olympics are supposed to start, and they had to ban all spectators because they've had breakouts again, right? So what's happened is when these countries are doing a good job, keeping their people safe, part of reopening is reopening the borders. And then you get people bringing it back into the countries, and they're starting from square one again, right? By not vaccinating people at the same level as we have in our countries, by not sharing the technology, you've doomed yourself to going through this over and over, because the COVID is just going to continue to mutate and get better and better at infecting people. And we're going to need boosters again. And we're just back to square one, right? And this is all because the capitalists told us, everybody has to go back to work. All your kids have to go back to school because the economy, oh my God, we're going to inflation, blah, blah, blah. All of the bullshit austerity stories that we hear from our politicians, right? That didn't keep people safe. Mm-hmm. Then now we're just seeing it again, right? We're going to, America is completely in complete denial about these problems, right? We watched the All-Star game last night. They had a absolutely packed stadium of people watching the All-Star game, right? We are in danger of going through this again this winter, where the cases are spiking and everybody's in lockdown and nobody goes back to normal again. It's just the same old, and it's all because your politicians are trying to sell you that everything's back to normal and it's all good.
Well, it's just the kind of friendlier way of saying we need you to sacrifice yourself for the economy. when Republicans said it, we all went, oh my God, outrage, but we're actually doing it. So I want to get to some of the comments. And Red State Annie, you're new, so thank you for joining us this morning. But I want to correct you. You said there is no data showing Delta is more deadly. This person is BS. By this person, I'm guessing you're talking about me. And Annie, get your coffee together, because that is not what I said. What I said is more virulent, means it has a higher rate of transmission, and there's a big difference. So let's make sure that we stick to the facts on this. And I'm seeing a whole lot of comments in here with things that have already been disproven. Universal Earthling said none of the vaccines were tested to determine whether they prevent viral transmission. Bullshit. That is absolute bullshit. And in fact, what's really awesome is in Russia, when they did their testing, they made all of their third level testing public. So Universal Earthling, don't trust Pfizer, don't trust Johnson, whatever you want to do, but go out and check Russia's data. They pull it out there. It's there. So what happened is we accelerated the testing, which, having worked for medical companies and had to do the FDA regulations, it was a hugely accelerated process. But it doesn't mean there wasn't testing done. So let's keep the facts. Keep the facts today. And a lot of you have not watched our show before, and maybe you kind of got into the free for all when you watch other shows. We stick to facts here, not necessarily left, right, whatever. We say to facts. Data doesn't lie, so let's try to keep that honest in the chat here. The Universal Earthling again. Leftist heralding lockdowns, for fuck's sake. Yeah, absolutely, I am, because I live in a very small, poor state. I don't want to lose any more people here. And particularly Universal Earthling, it takes 12 years to make a doctor, 8 years to make a nurse. Those people are hugely valuable to me. And do you know how many we've lost in this country? Do you know how many we've lost globally? And oh, by the way, we still don't have free college for people. So do you know how much it costs to make a doctor or a nurse? Yeah, I don't want to lose any more. I don't. And if you missed the prior conversation about Medicare for all, I'm going to ask you to go back and watch it and maybe pick up some empathy here. Lockdowns, yes, because in this country, we did not invest in our people the way that they did in others, with a standard universal UBI or whatever you want to call it. The most important thing that was on our plate as citizens of a country together was to stay home. Stay home, keep our families safe, keep our communities safe. This isn't hard. This is not hard. And we did not take care of our small businesses or restaurants. We sure did take care of the hedge funds. We sure did take care of all of those big investment firms that all of Congress is invested in. So, maybe sit back for a minute, take a break from your keyboard warrior shit, and think about real people and who are being affected. So yeah, I'm all in favor of lockdown so long as we get what the rest of the world got. It's insane that in this country we didn't, and we applauded that. That's crazy to me. So let's take a look at the next graphic. And Universal, I hope that you will look at this one pretty carefully, because this is objective data. And I put the source on it here. So this is the US CDC data tracker of July 2021. And you'll notice that Texas is gray because Texas refused to report on how many people are vaccinated, how many people are in communities where it is actually, they're more likely to contract it. So we have zero data coming out of Texas. But if you look at my state of New Mexico, Universal, do you know where New Mexico is? We're right next to Texas. So on this chart, if you can't read the numbers, look at the colors. So the lighter the blue, or the darker the blue, the better that that area is, not only in terms of their vaccination rate, but their social risk. So even if you look at Illinois up north, that is really blue, the Chicago area is down in the purple and the reddish area. That means those people, like Chicago, statistically, 60% of all deaths in Chicago proper in March, April, May were Black men. And why is that? Less likely to have health insurance, less likely to get the care that they need, less likely to go, less likely to be able to get off work to go, more likely to be in a job that puts them public facing. Can we afford to lose more Black men? I don't think so. So when you're denying what is actually happening, like if you make a personal choice or you cannot, for your immunocompromised whatever, you can't get the vaccine, that's fine. But please don't make that choice for my kid. Don't make it for my family. Don't make it for my community. I live in a very poor area. These people matter, right? So here's what it looks like. And in our southern states, we have a ton of people at risk. And I want to point out, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, in those red areas in the southern states, that's where Doctors Without Borders currently operates in the United States. They set up triage areas because these people don't get access to health care. So for example, in the state of Georgia, to qualify for Medicaid right now, you have to earn less than $398 per month and have a dependent. That is less than destitution. There are panhandlers living under bridges who earn more money than that. And that's the state of Georgia. And also in these southern states, these are 7 of the 10 states where sepsis is a common bacterial infection easily treated with antibiotics. But sepsis now is one of the top 3 leading causes of death behind heart attack and cancer. Sepsis. That is because in the United States, average people do not have access to health care, or if they have insurance at all, it is too expensive and burdensome, and they don't go get care.
And that's
so they
surreal.
End up with a sepsis infection. That's it's not even third world. That is subpar, and that is the United States. So however you feel about this, if you're going into biological warfare, whatever, stop for a second. Just stop and look at this. We are going to lose another 600,000 or more because we don't have access to healthcare. We are not working together. You are not leaning into empathy. Are we all in this together or not? If you're still looking at Congress to save you, you need to look next to you at your neighbor, because this is all we have. So, all right, Andy, your take on this, because I know that Canada you guys were on point. And I am privileged to live in a state where the governor took it seriously in January last year, while the rest of the country was still hemming and hawing. So, yeah.
Excuse me. Well, do you recall how the Democratic Party was lauding President Biden's plan to deal with COVID, right? How they were going to do such a better job, because quite honestly, COVID was Donald Trump's fault. And let's be clear, Trump, is an imbecile and, made a ton of mistakes, but at least they did shut down eventually in late March, early April, right? But Biden's plan was going to be so much better. It was going to save lives. It was going to do so much for the American people. They did nothing. They just continued with the vaccine process that was put in place by the Trump administration. That's the only thing that's changed under this new administration, right? So, more performative politics in the United States, right? Ooh, wow, that's great. That's helping a lot of people. The clear facts are that the capitalists, the neoliberal capitalists in the world that run much of it, right, that are bought and paid for by the oligarch class, have always depended on the market to save them from everything. And we know that that can't happen because it's not profitable. The only thing that the American government really did for people was to create a vaccine. And why did that happen? Because it ended up making a shit ton of money for pharmaceutical industries. That's all they did, right? They relied on the vaccine to roll.
Right. Renee actually wrote that. She wrote that in the chat. So I want to shout out to Renee on that, talking about the patent applications on that. But I'm sorry, Andy, please go ahead.
No, I that's absolutely fine. But it's absolutely true that this is really the only way that made sense for a capitalist, profit-driven society to combat COVID. Because when you're a capitalist, we have to see the GDP go up. We have to make money. We have to continue to make more money, to increase our market size, to keep cash flowing into the pockets of people that run things, right? That's why vaccinations was the only way to deal this that made sense, right? Had America taken this seriously and actually cared to save people's lives, they would have locked it down. They would have shared the technology with other countries to make vaccines. We would have destroyed COVID together, all countries in the world. But that didn't happen. And now we keep doing the definition of insanity, where we keep doing the same things over and over and expecting a different result, right? That's what's happening, right? Don't believe the operatives that are trying to tell you that it isn't real. The vaccines aren't tested. This is a way to control the population. This is capitalists using the market to try to gain more profits and hope that things will turn out for the better. And that's all there is to it, right? And we're seeing that COVID is once again getting the upper hand. And I know that people are absolutely sick of lockdowns and not being able to go places and not being able to do the things they used to do, right? But you got nobody to blame but the people in power, because they didn't keep us safe the first time. We'd done this right the first time, we would have been back to a somewhat quote unquote normal now. But we didn't.
Yeah, I mean, just look at what New Zealand did, and they're kind of the litmus test for the rest of us, right? So I want to get to some of these comments. Eric Gray says both of the major parties are sadistic. Well, I think part of it is okay. So when I was a consultant at a major insurance company, and they were literally assessing collateral damage, they called it morbidity tables. These are the people who are most likely to die and what the cost of paying for their care was. They went through this process, and I found it interesting to observe it. The mental gymnastics that they had to do to make sure that they could sleep at night. Now, these were not horrible people, but it was interesting to see the change that they had to go through, because here I've got a job, and in many cases it was a good, well-paying job, and I need to be okay with the work that I'm doing, because the heart of a human nature is we want to do work that is meaningful, that does something and has, gives back. So if you're an executive at an insurance company, how do you reconcile that? And I would watch them test out certain excuses, and then I would watch the more seasoned person give an excuse to the other one that, yeah, it's okay, it's all right. And it's the exact same thing that Andy and I mentioned at the beginning of the show with these DNC operatives trying to shut down the march for Medicare for all. They're telling themselves that, well, if you just wait, if you just wait, because that makes them feel better about their position and the morality that they are compromising. So this is kind of what's happening also with the COVID and all of this sort of thing. So Red State Annie, I gotta tell you, I don't know where you're getting your information from, but I need you to kind of come back to reality a little bit. And there's just okay, so Eric Gray also said something I think has merit, and I think maybe something we develop into a topic for the next show. He says, we need a full-scale societal rebuild, and it needs to be what we fight for in the long term. Well, Eric, isn't that exactly what we're talking about in these marches, right? So we've got this catastrophic, and I want to make sure people understand this in very real terms, because it's hard to do in the abstract. When climate scientists for decades have been saying extinction level events, they didn't just mean animals and plants, they meant us. So let's sit with that term for a second. Extinction level. That is what we're facing right now, and we're seeing the effects of it. Like Brooklyn. Brooklyn had rain, Brooklyn, New Jersey, all of that tri-state area, to the subways are flooded. Highways are flooded. And these are the same areas where sea level rise is going to affect millions of people. Here we have the Colorado River on the West Coast, where I had a conversation with a woman whose children were in Phoenix. And it just didn't register with her that what was going on with the Colorado River and the drought was going to affect her kids. She was telling me we need to wait for President Kamala Harris, and that we need to wait for President Stacey Abrams, and we need to wait for AOC eventually. And my point to her was, why do you think your kids have that kind of time when they're talking about this year putting restrictions on water? This year, I mean, within months, and it didn't register with her. So this is the context that we're in, and I do want to stress, it's scary. So like Red State Annie, I know why you're posting all of this stuff, and I know why you're going out there, because it's so much easier to believe that this is all conspiracy and it's not real. It goes back to that old adage of there's a bear in the woods that is threatening your village. And what do you do about this bear? There are some people who will say, well, I'm going to shut my doors and shut my windows and hope it goes away. And there are other people who will say, well, the neighboring village sent this bear over, so we're going to go attack that other village. And then the third group says, well, I need to go out and hunt the bear. So Annie, I get that you're one of those first two groups, but I need you to not interfere with the third group. That third group is let's take it right to the bear, let's address it, and let's work together to solve this problem. So yeah, but please don't interfere. Just get out of the way. Yeah, so those are the big topics. And Andy, we're almost out of time here. Is there anything I'm missing? And this is really not a deep dive on these particular topics, because I think it's a little late, but I'm reassured that mainstream media is now covering climate change, even though we have batshit crazy people like Louis Gohmert still out there at Republican conferences saying it's all bullshit. It's not. It's not, Louis. Your state is being affected right now. So, yeah, I'm not sure how to get through to people other than maybe if they see it on corporate-owned media, they'll start to understand it. But I will tell you, in my state, I love my state because I have Republicans, conservatives, liberals, progressives. Nobody here denies that climate change is real. Nobody. And it's because we see the effects of it every day. So
Absolutely.
yeah,
If you is still in
hopefully,
denial of climate change and you know somebody in the Portland area, call them up and ask them, how much did you enjoy the 116-degree temperatures a couple of weeks ago?
mm.
You know,
Yeah. Okay. So there's a comment from Nadia. Nadia, thank you for being. I'm sorry, Andy, I jumped in here, but
not a problem.
Nadia is really coming up with some really good, poignant comments here. She said, "What about planned obsolescence from not distributing the vaccines in third world mutant strains would arise?" Okay, so Andy and I covered that, and you're new, Nadia, so you missed it. This is an economic thing, and we talked about the patents and all of that. And both of us were railing that if we don't address this on a global level, it was going to come back to haunt us, as we're seeing now. Because at that time, it was ravaging Brazil and India, and we were watching it move north to the U.S. So this is obviously a U.S. arrogant-centric view where we're, protecting ourselves by helping everyone else, but isn't that how it works? If you remember your elementary science class, when we talked about microcosms and environments, the entire world is our microcosm here, right? So this is what happens in India does affect us. And it was all monetary policy. I don't think that it was, well, I don't know, maybe there was some racism or bullshit involved, but primarily we talked about Bill Gates arguing against releasing the patents and giving them away. We had that show a couple months ago. So Nadia, I appreciate you bringing that particular point up, but doesn't that go to the same argument that I've been making throughout this entire program? Community, help each other, and that's where Medicare for All and all of these programs come together. That's the heart of it. Right? I may not like my neighbor. I got a bunch of, if you're a Trump supporter, I apologize in advance, but I got a bunch of batshit crazy Trump supporters here. I would still help them. I would help them because they're part of my community. Right? That's the empathy that we talked about at the beginning of the show. Why do we not have that? Is that fear driven? So Nadia, I really appreciate I may not agree with everything you said, but I really appreciate the thoughtful commentary that you've provided this morning. So I could talk all day, and we're after the top of the hour. So,
yes, and we can't afford to,
out.
because there just isn't enough hours in the day. We've got other things to do.
Yeah, but for those of you who are new watching, please join us on Friday, because we will actually have some of the organizers from Chicago who are doing the March for Medicare for All and what they're going through. And I got to tell you, I am so disappointed right now. And a lot of these progressive leaders in Chicago who have caved to pressure, a little bit of pressure, and they just right over Chicago. What? Come on now. You're supposed to have, it's the city of broad shoulders. What the hell happened? No backbone? Really?
Carrie,
So
save it for Friday. Save it for Friday.
Okay. So that is our Friday show. So
absolutely.
So please tune in, and I will be happy to answer more questions about what Medicare for All actually is from an unbiased, factual point of view. I can handle it from a conservative point of view, the leftist point of view, policy, whatever. I will answer those questions. So yeah.
Absolutely.
Andy, any words of wisdom to take us through the rest of this one?
Yeah, well, I'm just going to say, as a kind of a summary, that these March for Medicare for All marches are going to happen, right? Whether there are people on the left or pseudo left that don't want that to happen, right? So if you're in favor of these marches and you're working towards it, and you're putting your support behind it, kudos to you. Go crazy, get the word out, help make those changes. If you don't if you're not for Medicare for all, if you like the status quo, you know what? Enough with the trying to co-opt it. Sit the fuck down and let people march. It's their civics. It's their civic right. It's their right to assemble, their right to protest, their right to free speech. Just leave it alone, and stop being bad actors in our society. It's embarrassing now. You need to stop, right? We've got to make changes for everyone, right? The people that are advocating for these marches, that are participating, that are organizing, that are speaking at these, the bands that are going to be playing at these events, the MCs, the guest speakers, all of these people. If you're just going to march with the group, kudos to you, because this is what it's going to take to get the word out and to make the necessary changes. Keep doing what you're doing, because you're doing a great job. We here on this show support you 100%. And we will always advocate for those people that want to make change for the better, especially in the United States. And we will always call out the people that are the bad actors that won't. And that's all I got for us for today. So, Carrie, again, thank you for the wonderful work that you do and your reporting and your journalism and your activism. And everyone watching, thanks for spending the hour and a bit with us, and enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. And we will see you here bright and early on Friday morning. Take care.
We bout that, ayy. We in the zone. We out here, yeah. Spitting the facts, how it's supposed to be. Hair of the dog, we keeping it G. Whoa.